Hello, everyone. Welcome back to that GD show. Hey, Genevieve.
Hey, I'm so excited to be back. It was weird last week not being here.
Yeah, you can tell everyone that Genevieve missed being here last week.
I did. I really did. I'm sorry that I don't have an adorable tiny human with me, but
well, you know what? We had to. We brought in two co-hosts last week to replace you, Jenna Belk and her son Dexter. So, yeah, he was the star of the show based on the comments. And welcome, Dr. Josh. How are you today?
I'm doing well. How are you?
Good to have you with us. You know, was that not the snazziest intro music you've heard on any YouTube show
pretty
ever?
Pretty snazzy.
Yeah. Dave, I didn't tell you, but I was on Truth Wanted on Friday, and we had a call come in, and they asked me, they said, before I get into my question, because I don't want to take up too much of your time, will you be in the Discord after show? Because I have a question for Genevieve. And I was like, yes, I will. And so lo and behold, that question was, what is that intro music? You have to let me know. And I'm so sorry to tell everybody that it's not a song that has any musician that I can find anywhere else. It's this guy named McVitt who put out a bunch of just funky show tunes for folks like us who want songs for our YouTube, but don't want to spend hundreds and hundreds of dollars in royalties for songs you've ever heard. So I hope that answers the question once for all.
We found it on some site. I forget what the name of it was, but I've had several people ask me, and I've seen it in the comments and stuff. So yeah, we're pleased with it. It works. Gives a little energy boost going in. By the way, everyone, I want to remind you this is a call-in show. We take calls of all kinds. Well, not from everyone. There are some trolls who are banned, the usual suspects. But call us at 217-375-9933. I can't see. Those letters are so small. I should know that number. WWDD of the last. And have, if you've got calls about what we're going to talk about tonight, which is Bible languages, the Old Testament, the formation of the Bible, the stories in the Bible, primarily the Old Testament, because I think that's your expertise, right, Josh?
Yeah,
I
guess that's my thing.
One of your expertise. Anyway, if calling about that, if you want to talk Bible, if you want to talk Old Testament, or any other questions you have for Josh or me or Genevieve, we're here to chat with you. So, Josh, you and I, we've not met. We've kind of connected online a couple times, and as it turns out, we're planning to be together at a couple of conferences next year where we're both scheduled to speak. Two that I know of so far, so that'll be fun. I want to kind of start with a little bit of your background and who you are, where you came from, how you got to be doing the stuff you're doing now. You can take as much or as little time as you want to kind of give us some background on that. So I'll start with one thing I know about you is that you graduated from Liberty University. Oh yes,
thanks for opening with that.
Yeah, well, I gotta start hard there. Let's go.
Yeah, so I guess a little bit of background. I grew up fundamentalist evangelical Christian for, I guess I was that for 26 years in the end before I deconverted.
Wow.
And so I joined the Air Force when I was 17, and while I was in, I decided I wanted to become a chaplain, and the way to do that was to get a bachelor's degree and then go get a master's degree at a seminary. And so the school that I was able to attend while I was on active duty was Liberty University's distance learning program. So I did that. And by the way, I'm getting a little bit of an echo. I don't know if it's just me, but
I don't hear it. What do you? I hear.
Okay.
Okay. I think
as long as you guys don't hear it, that's all that matters.
Okay.
So yeah, I got my bachelor's from Liberty, and then enrolled at Capital Bible Seminary, which is another fundamentalist evangelical school, and went on to get a master's of theology there before I went for my Ph.D.
Okay. And at Liberty, you got a basic what kind of a degree did you get there? Basic education?
It was a bachelor's in theology, bachelor of science in theology.
I think you said that, but
or
I
in
missed
religion.
It.
Yeah.
And then you did you ever get into the chaplaincy?
I was a chaplain candidate for 4 or 5 years, I think. Which is they commission you as a second lieutenant and you do tours, but you're not officially a chaplain. So I did a tour at the Air Force Academy. I did one at Nellis Air Force Base. So some cool places to go, but yeah, they offered me that position up at or that PhD candidate position up at Johns Hopkins, and it's one that I couldn't turn down. So,
and what did you study at Johns Hopkins? Tell us what you did there and what happened while you were there.
So, while I was getting my master's in theology, I focused in on the Old Testament, Hebrew Bible, that sort of thing. So I started studying Semitic languages like crazy. So, everybody learns Koine Greek, but then I learned Hebrew and then Aramaic and then Targumic Aramaic and then Akkadian, and started studying Ugaritic and Syriac and blah, blah, blah. All these languages that help you, dig further down into the Hebrew Bible. And I spoke to a professor while I was there, maybe my 5th year, and said, what do you think I should do? And he said, well, you have I don't think he said it this way, but it was sort of like you have the psychosis of liking to study a lot. And so not many people have that. So you should go get a PhD. Don't waste that psychosis. And he said, if you really want to be the best at studying, the Old Testament, you want to learn East Semitic. That's what you want to learn. You want to learn Akkadian. Okay.
By the way, I have no idea what these things are that you're saying, but I'm going to nod like I know what you're talking about.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, well, I guess I'll get there in probably 9 seconds now. So the languages, Hebrew is a Semitic language. So it's cognate with, it's in the same language families like Arabic. And of course, ancient languages, like dead languages like Aramaic. There's a language.
I was going to say these are dead languages for the most part, like Latin. No one speaks them anymore, but they're historical languages. Okay, gotcha. I want to make sure I was clear on that.
I mean, people speak Hebrew still, and there are people that speak a dialect of Aramaic. But yeah, for the most part, the ancient languages are still different enough anyway. And so Akkadian is one of those Semitic languages we have a lot of Akkadian material, and it's actually preserved on cuneiform tablets, clay tablets. So, they said that's the language that you really want to focus in on if you want to become like this great Old Testament scholar. So that's what I applied to. The field that you go into to study Akkadian and like the ancient Near East in general is called Assyriology. So like ancient Assyria. And so that's what I majored in, was Assyriology, because I wanted to really study Akkadian and Sumerian, this other ancient language. And I minored in Hebrew Bible because of all my experience in it. So that's what I got my PhD in. I majored in Assyriology, minored in Hebrew Bible.
And all this while you were still a Christian at Johns Hopkins, but it was
no. So so I taught at this very fundamentalist school Capital Bible Seminary. The last 2 years that I was there, I taught the graduate seminar, the graduate cycle of Hebrew language. And when I was getting ready to leave, I'd been accepted to Hopkins. I saw the dean like on the way out the door after teaching my last class. So I was holding my Hebrew Bible in my hand, and he said, "Are you ready to go to Johns Hopkins? A very liberal school, you know."
Was he saying that kind of in a accusatory, like,
yeah,
do
like
you know what
Satan's
do you know
at
what
work
you're
there.
doing? Okay,
Yeah,
gotcha.
Satan's at work there. Are you sure
Yeah.
you know what you're getting into? And I remember holding up my Hebrew Bible, and I said, "I'm going into the lion's den, but I'm going to win souls for Christ."
Now, you really still believe that at that point, right?
Oh, yes, very much.
So you were very
much so.
sincere, thinking, I can handle this. I can go into this liberal bastion of carnality and come out unscathed, right?
Yeah.
Yes.
You know what, I just, not to interject, but I find that so funny because, as we mentioned briefly in the show, I also went to Johns Hopkins for my undergrad, and I didn't finish, but the funniest thing was that I went to study economics, and in my senior year of high school, I was with my economics mentor, working on some extracurricular project, and he said, "Are you ready to go to Johns Hopkins? They're very conservative." And so
Oh my God.
I find that perspective just so funny.
That is
But
hilarious.
if you are coming from like a fundamentalist background, I can see how what our conservative is very liberal and worldly to others.
Yeah. I mean, they had like recycling bins around the campus. I mean, that was a crazy liberal place.
Yeah, why would you need to save the earth? Jesus is going to come back and burn it all up. So what's the point?
Why fix the radio on a plane that's crashing? I mean, why even do that?
No, it's interesting that your perspective can kind of dictate what you think about something, and really where you're coming from means everything in terms of what's liberal and conservative and safe and dangerous and all those things. So you went in feeling like you could maintain your faith in the midst of the wolves, so to speak.
Yeah, no question. And actually, when I got there, I was taking, almost as probably maybe at times more Hebrew Bible courses than I was Assyriology courses. So like I took a Hebrew Bible epigraphy course, and I was taking biblical archaeology along with regular archaeology, and then taking these Hebrew language classes. And I had what came to be a very, very good friend of mine, Andrew, and he was 2 years ahead of me in the program. And he said he learned about my background, and he said, "Oh, okay, all right. How long do you think you'll last?" I said,
what did he mean?
I said, what do you mean? He said, "Well, I mean, you're not going to be an evangelical Christian for very long here." And I said, "Oh, no, I don't you worry, buddy boy." And he said, "All right, we'll see." And every week I'd come into class, and he'd say, "How you doing?"
Oh my God, that's funny.
Say, shut up, Andrew. But yeah, one of the things that I think is incredibly problematic for a fundamentalist approach to the biblical texts is this. First of all, the idea of inerrancy and inspiration,
right,
that accompanies the text, and along with that, this. I mean, I don't think it's doing injustice to the text quite often to have a literalist interpretation of it, in the sense that most people understand that word literalist interpretation. But the problem is that it's just damning to the text when you start to, read ancient Near Eastern literature, and you see, hey, that sounds a hell of a lot like the flood story.
Yeah, the first book is ever recorded, I believe, is the Epic of Gilgamesh. I don't know how you can read the Epic of Gilgamesh and then, read the story of Noah's flood and not wonder, which one is true, which inspired what, it's.
Yeah. And even, Sumerian literature, that's good. So the Epic of Gilgamesh is an Akkadian text. Well, Sumerian is even older than Akkadian, and there are Sumerian flood stories. And it's like, you start to read this stuff, and even just reading it in English translation, it's like, whoa. So that, coupled with having to actually study rigorously ancient Near Eastern history and archaeology, I mean, it was just like this perfect storm.
Mm-hmm.
And just one day, I was in a history of Syro-Palestine class, it just like popped. And I just,
What do you mean? So you felt it when you say it popped. It's like a light went off, and you said, "Oh no, this isn't real," or something like that.
for me, I think as for many fundamentalist evangelicals, because the historicity of the biblical stories is absolutely essential.
Yes.
When you start to see, holes poked in
Mm-hmm.
these narratives, like, okay, the Exodus didn't really happen this way. 3 million people couldn't have walked out of Egypt in the late Bronze Age, or look, Jericho didn't actually fall during the late Bronze Age. This is really problematic. You start to go, these, at first you can kind of be like, oh, well, I have an possible explanation. I have a possible explanation for that one. Yeah, this. But after the 5th, 6th, 7th, 8th, 10th, 20th, it's like, and then coupled with all this ancient literature that dates, much, much earlier than the biblical text.
Right.
I remember sitting in class and we learned about the Philistines. And that was just one more thing that didn't align with the way the biblical text presents it. And it was just like, that was the straw that broke the camel's back for me.
Mm-hmm.
And I just said, well, if the Bible's not historically accurate 100%, then it's not inerrant. And if it's not inerrant, then it's not inspired. And if it's not inspired, then it's just a man-made book. And all this is bullshit.
Man,
And
that's exactly my path, Josh. Exactly.
Yeah.
All of my faith hinged upon the inspiration and inerrancy of the Bible.
Yeah.
And once that unraveled for me, it was like the first domino, and every other domino just toppled over so fast. It was disorienting and disturbing, to be honest.
Yeah.
Genevieve, you were going to say something?
No, I mean,
Yeah,
I was just going to say, I talk to a lot of people who are mid-deconstruction process and people who are post-deconstruction, as both of you are. I myself have never gone through deconstruction. I'm one of those weird lifelong atheist secular people. But, it sounds like, unlike a lot of people that I talk to for whom this is like years and years of going back and forth and sort of, just really wrestling with this, it sounds like when you're in a position where you are literally at a top university studying these ancient language and there's so much that you just blatantly cannot ignore, how quick was that process for you? And was it like a band-aid, or was it like falling into the abyss, or just I guess this changes my trajectory? I guess I'm just wondering. It sounds
to answer
very different.
to answer it effectively, I'll tell the story of my friend Caleb, who came the year after me and studied all the same stuff. He's an Assyriologist as well.
Very nice biblical names you guys have, Joshua and Caleb.
And Joshua.
That's very nice.
And we were inseparable. Like we were joined at the hip. He went to Trinity Seminary, and he maintained his evangelical faith throughout Johns Hopkins. And he's an evangelical Christian to this day, and brilliant scholar. There's no question, brilliant scholar. And it was interesting to me because I had lots of conversations with him while we were there after I deconverted. And I said, like, how do you maintain this? How do you know, for example, that, God is real and it's not Enki. It's not Enlil, right? How do you know it's not Marduk? And what I find interesting, and I've thought about this actually over the past year and a half, quite a bit, the significant difference between me and Caleb was that I came in as a fundamentalist. and it hit me all at once. And there were no significant apologetics that allowed me to like piecemeal sort of say, all right, let me see if I can dive into this one and explain it away. I didn't have any of that apologetics background because it wasn't a big deal to do. Right. So then it was all at once, and it was one big punch that drove me back a distance to then look at the data, I think, more objectively and say, okay, is it possible that this Christian thing still works? Yeah, it's possible, but it doesn't seem likely. It doesn't seem like it's the most reasonable conclusion. Whereas with Caleb, Caleb got his master's degree, but from a non-fundamentalist school. And so, he was able to learn about things like genre and engage with, possible explanations for, how evolution still works and the Bible's still true, those sorts of things. And so it was this sort of, as it came to him, he had support around him, and he could learn about these apologetic things. And then, it was like, for me, it's like the frog going into water and then you slowly turning up, the temperature. Well, that wasn't it. It was, I'm the frog and they just dropped me in boiling water.
Right.
And it was boom, out.
Yeah.
And whereas with Caleb, I think a better analogy for him is that he was in the water and they slowly turned up the heat. So then he went from boiling water, into this other.
So he's
water
able to maintain his faith to this day, as far as you know.
Yeah.
And
That's right.
that's what I find so funny. I know another awesome YouTuber, Apologia, kind of touched on this before in his video called "Ken Ham Made Me an Atheist," and that's kind of the problem with these like fundamentalist views of the Bible, is that if you go in believing everything has to be exactly how it went, the Earth is this many thousands of years old, and dinosaurs lived with man, and everything. Then as soon as you just get one chink in that armor, which with what we know, not even going into understanding the ancient languages and the context of this, but just going off of what we know about science, it's no wonder that people who ascribe to that sort of fundamentalist view tend to fall much quicker than those who grow up with a more progressive worldview, where you understand that the Bible is a collection of laws and some history and some allegory and all of this stuff. I think it's so funny because it feels like the people who are fighting the hardest to apply the Bible to everybody and the whole world around them are the ones that seem to be leading people away. It's interesting.
I want to say real quick, thank you, Kiro Wolf, for your very kind super sticker donation. Kiro is actually working on a draft for the my book cover, and I'm anxious to see what he comes up with. Thank you for that. Kiro, call in if you want. If you got a question for Dr. Josh, we've got some lines open. We do have a couple of callers coming in, but we'll pick them up in a minute. Josh, was there ever, as you're sitting in these classes at Johns Hopkins and all this new information is coming in that's contradictory to what you believed the Bible to be about, was there ever a point where you were having to decide which thing do I believe? Maybe these people that I'm listening to now are wrong and the Bible authors are right. Or was the information just too compelling and you knew that what you were hearing was true and what you thought you knew was false? Describe that process mentally for you.
It's interesting because this is something that I feel like I deal with now quite a bit online. People saying, these liberal scholars, I hear that so often, these liberal scholars, whatever that means. I think what they mean is any scholar that disagrees with their fundamentalist position.
Right,
exactly.
100%. But these liberal scholars, they just, they hate God and they hate the supernatural, and they say the supernatural is not possible. And so that's why they say the prophecies in the Bible. And it's like, whoa. I mean, I'd say half, maybe more of my department identified as Christian, the faculty, and the thing is, it never matters. Like once I deconverted, I forgot about it. Like it was okay. A couple weeks, it was really weird and new. but for the most part, the rest of my time there at Hopkins was just learning the ancient world. There was never, like, I remember taking an Ezekiel class. We translated through Ezekiel and talked about it. And I don't remember what was said about Ezekiel 26, that prophecy against Tyre, the failed prophecy. Like, I don't even know that it came up.
Wow, this was not an issue for you.
It's because of, why would it, right?
Yeah.
This just not what this is about.
I find that fascinating, and I want to get back to that in a minute. I want to get to a call or two here. You ready, Josh, for a call?
All set.
We got Tony, him in Mexico. He has talked with theists and is not sure if Jesus is actually God. Wanted Dr. Josh take on that. And let's see if we can get Tony on the line. Hello, Tony.
Hello, guys.
How you
Hi,
doing?
Tony.
Good afternoon.
Welcome to the show. You've got Dave Genevieve and Dr. Josh Bowen. You had a question about if Jesus is actually God.
Yeah. First of all, I just wanted to say thanks to Genevieve for finally sharing the name of the intro song.
Oh, there you go.
I am
Tony,
so glad.
Yeah,
I've been trolling Dave for weeks.
Yeah. As soon as I saw you were in Mexico, I assumed that was you. Which, by the way,
cool.
before you get to your question, I'm sorry to interrupt, but I did get my booster shot today, my COVID booster shot. So now I've had both the Johnson & Johnson and the Pfizer. Please get vaccinated. I know you were asking about vaccination safety and efficacy. So just encourage you again. I will keep you updated if I get magnetic or die. So please move on to your question.
Thank you for sharing that, Genevieve.
Yeah. You're not magnetic or anything like that.
No. I'm just much safer to hug and be around.
But your 5G of reception just went way up, is what I understand.
I mean, there is a massive storm brewing, but my Wi-Fi is great. It's either Jesus or myself or Pfizer. But
well, Tony, let's talk about whether God is Jesus. What are your thoughts or questions about that?
Yeah, I usually have these, not debates, but like conversations with people who are theists. I'm being more vocal lately about this, and they usually tell me that Jesus is God. But I mean, as I understand, there's problems with that. There's verses in the Bible where he talks with God and refers to God's will as others. But some of these theists actually are able to bring back some other verses in the Bible that kind of say that Jesus is actually God. Like the prophecies, I think this is in Isaiah, the book of Isaiah. So, I mean, I'm so glad Dr. Josh is here. I wanted to ask his.
Me too. So, yeah, speak to that, Josh. You're a theology major, and all of these questions about God and Jesus. Clear it up for us.
Yes. So probably my favorite line that I've become known for is that's not really my area of expertise. I don't know if you guys have heard me say that before.
It's a nice disclaimer, right? Yeah.
I feel like I say that all the time because it's true. So, like New Testament studies, it's not what I got my PhD in.
Right,
so,
right.
That being said, there's no question that the role of theology it's the art form of, in many ways, the art form of harmonization. Right? It's trying to wrestle with in these ancient texts, in these biblical texts, for example. Well, we have one statement over here that says man has free will, but then we have these other statements over here that says God is sovereign and in control of everything. How do we make this make sense? That's where theology steps in, right? Well, how do we do that? So how do we have passages in the canon, in the inspired word of God? One says that Jesus says no man knows the day or the hour, or makes predictions in Matthew 24 about this generation will not pass away and the Son of Man will come, and then that doesn't happen. So how do you have these types of statements that seem to depict God and Jesus in a very human light, but then yet particularly in like passages like John or in the book of Revelation, or there are other passages like Tony's talking about Isaiah 53 and these prophecies, these prophecies that are supposed to be about him.
Even in Romans,
yeah,
Romans is also mentioned 9:6, if I believe.
Yeah.
Something.
So, how do we reconcile those things? And again, this is sort of the role of theology, and the assumption, the underlying assumption in this is that both have to be right.
Mm-hmm.
Right? In the same way that if a text talks about how Jesus is fully man, like he's completely human, but yet you see him as divine, well, he can't be like half divine and half man. That's heresy. And he can't be like 3/4 divine.
Well, we always postured that by saying he's fully God and fully man. And
yeah,
you make these statements that on the surface don't make any fucking sense. But
not even deep do they make sense.
No. But it's almost like you have to resort to magic. How can you be fully God and fully man? Well, I guess, it works in Harry Potter or something. So why can't it work in the Bible? And you have to suspend reality to make these things make sense. I mean, is that kind of where you ended up, Josh? I mean, as a Christian, you had to really kind of force fit these things into some kind of making sense.
For me, it wasn't such an issue. I just finished the introduction to my new book. That's volume 2 of the Atheist Handbook to the Old Testament. And in it, I talk about the difference between laying out like a more reasonable conclusion and proving your case, right, to your opponent. And there's a difference between those two. And when you try to prove something, like I'm going to prove that there's a contradiction here in Genesis 2 or something.
Right.
The fundamentalist evangelical or the apologist, all they have to do, and they'll do it automatically, is fall back on, is it possible that it's not a contradiction? Is it possible? Because their underlying assumption is it can't be. This is a divine book. So if there's even a possibility that it's not a contradiction, let's say that this is a second group of animals that's being created here in Genesis 2, as opposed to them being created in a different order because it's a different story.
Right.
If that's even possible, then that solves the problem. That's all they need. And I think this is the issue here. It was the issue here for me. All I needed was a possibility. And really, so often that possibility on these more difficult theological issues was, God's not subject to the laws of logic.
Exactly.
So what if I can't understand that there are 3 persons and yet
His
one
ways,
divine essence that undivided? Yeah, that's right. The God's ways are higher than our ways.
Who are we to question God's ways? Right.
So for me, at the end of the day, it was, very much so, because the Bible tells me so, and I know God and I trust him, and he's hella smart, right? And I'm hella not, so it's fine. Of course, I would have said like hecka smart, but
So Tony, to your question, is that kind of speaking to your question? I guess it's not really a question because you don't believe Jesus is God. You're just talking to theists about it, right?
Yeah, my position is that he can't be God. I don't believe he's even real.
Right.
But I'm adamant in my position that the theist is wrong by saying that Jesus is God. And to be honest, this answer is not very helpful. But it's not. I'm not blaming you guys. I understand that the whole text of the Bible is. That's its nature, to be confusing and illogical.
Right.
However, I have heard that the early Christianity once persecuted people for saying that Jesus was God. However, I don't know much about early Christianity in antiquity. So
I actually, I will steal Dr. Josh Bowen's tagline. I am not an expert on this, but whereas he has, decades of being a Christian and then getting a Ph.D., I literally don't have any of that. So please fact check anything I say, take it with a grain of salt. But what I will say is that, when it comes to the divinity of Jesus, I think one of the most damning things is that as far as early Christianity goes, like there was no consensus. That's why they had the Council of Nicaea to sort of designate whether they thought that Jesus was fully man, fully God. Did he just appear to be man? I mean, these are arguments that were had for centuries before, you know, anything that we would recognize as the Bible as it is today was even put together. And you know, I know that as we've talked about, apologists have an answer for everything, even if it's just God works in mysterious ways, or it's, you know, we're big dumb and he's big smart, so of course we don't understand. But one of the most damning things, I forget exactly which passage it is, but it's when, you know, I believe it's in Matthew when Jesus says, you know, not all of you will pass before the kingdom comes. You know, he's telling his followers, like, you know, act fast, get right now, because the kingdom is coming, and you guys will still be alive. This is happening in your generation. And so the first apologists really were the ones who had to reconcile the fact that they did indeed pass, that the kingdom indeed did not come. And
well,
so,
there are ways to dance around that too. The kingdom
of
came
course,
when Jesus was resurrected, so the kingdom was ushered in at that point. It's an invisible kingdom, and blah 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 blah.
yeah, you know, and exactly. There's so much, but like, and this comes back to what is most plausible. Is it more likely that Jesus was terrible at explaining his point, or that he was indeed not God and was just one of the many apocalyptic figures of the time?
And that's the problem with all of this. And I guess, to your point, Tony, the reason that our answers are not very helpful is because there are no good answers to this question. There are only what we're doing is what we're doing is parroting the Christian vernacular and the Christian ideology and the stand on this thing. So we really don't have. I mean, it doesn't make any sense that he's fully God and fully man. If he existed as a human being, how could he be God? But on the flip side of that, the whole New Testament story, the salvation story, hinges upon him being God and sacrificing himself for our sins. So if he was just a man, what was the point of the crucifixion? And as Paul said, if there's no resurrection, then our faith is in vain. So all of these components of the salvation message hinge upon him being some kind of divine figure that was sacrificed for our sins, a sinless creature, the sinless, spotless lamb sacrificed for a sinful man. If that's not true, then it all falls apart. So they've got to make him out to be God. Josh, wouldn't you agree with that perception of the message?
Yeah, certainly, certainly, at least in its, you know, final form. I will say that Bart Ehrman, of course, who's written quite a bit on this particular topic, I know that he's giving a seminar. I think it's November 7th. If you go to Myth Vision, the YouTube channel Myth Vision, he's got like a link in his most recent videos, and I think he had Bart Ehrman on to talk about it. But the seminar is "When Did Jesus Become God?" Right. So this, you know, this is what he deals with extensively. So was Jesus really, from a historical standpoint, you know, did the historical Jesus claim to be God, and when did that get attributed to him? I think, you know, he's obviously an expert on this topic, so I would recommend checking that out.
Well, also another person who lost his faith going to one of them secular schools and learning all that devil stuff.
Yeah, Princeton.
It tends to happen.
Yeah. And
well,
you know,
Tony,
speaking of Bart Ehrman, really quick, he's also written multiple books about this. Misquoting Jesus and Jesus Interrupted are two good books for you. You know, you don't have to agree with everything he says, but it's a good starting point. So
well, Tony, thank you for your call. We've got several other calls lined up. People wanting to get to Dr. Joss here. Thanks for calling, buddy. Thanks for your support.
Thank you, Tony.
Bye-bye.
Bye, Tony. Get vaccinated.
Bye. Okay, let's see. I think it's called
happy to hear back from him. We had a long discussion about vaccine misinformation. So
okay, it's not letting me. We've got a couple of the calls. I want to get to these guys. Kenneth, him in Illinois, wants to ask Dr. Josh if there was a particular misconception that atheists commonly have about the Old Testament. Let's see if we can get Kenneth on the line. Hello, Kenneth.
Hey, Dave. How's it going?
How you doing? Good to hear from you.
Good. Yeah. I just wanted to ask Dr. Josh, also, I wanted to say I really enjoyed the Atheist Handbook of the Old Testament. But I wanted to ask if there are...
we haven't even mentioned the book yet. I'm a terrible host. Say that name one more time, Kenneth.
Yeah, the Atheist Handbook to the Old Testament, available at fine bookstores everywhere on, Amazon. I kindled it.
There it is. Thank you, Josh. I'm so sorry, man. I meant to mention that at the top of the show.
Absolutely fine.
Yeah. Because I mean, we're here to sell books, right? No. So Kenneth, go ahead with your question. I'm sorry, buddy.
Yeah, no, I just so in my interactions with theists, it's just kind of, I don't know, kind of funny. I expect theists to get stuff wrong when they reference their Bibles, but I almost hold the atheist community to a higher standard. And I'm wondering if there are things that, if there's like shit atheists say that drives Dr. Josh crazy, where atheists misrepresent or misunderstand the Bible.
That's a good question.
Yeah, there are a couple. I don't know that they drive me crazy, because I guess it takes a lot to drive me crazy. And I apologize if you guys hear my 3-year-old screaming in the background. There are 5 children in this house, so
hey, we had a baby on the show last week. Don't worry about it.
There you go. But like the one that always pops up for me is in Exodus 21:20-21, where it talks about if a man beats his male or female slave with a wooden rod, and they die under his hand, like die immediately, then he's not to be, or that he'll be punished. But if he survives a day or two, then he won't be punished because he's his property. The way that that's often presented, of course, by a Christian apologist, it's like, oh, well, it's the nice kind of slavery, and it's like, so miss me with that shit. But from an atheist standpoint, the thing that bothers me is when you don't need to go to an extreme with that. And going to an extreme is if you say something like, oh, well, here is God, like giving a law that is intended to be a beat your slave to within an inch of their life and get away with it law. Like, hey, master, let me show you how to get away with, beating the hell out of your slave and getting away with it. Just don't kill him.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that law is not pro master, right? That law is not intended to protect the master. That law is intended, it also does protect the master, but its main intent is to mitigate slave abuse. Right. It's trying to say, look, you obviously have to be able to beat your slave because that was their mindset. You got to be able to beat your slave to correct him, because how else are you going to correct them or motivate them?
How are you going to keep them in line if you can't beat them?
Yeah. And I mean, that's obviously
exactly.
That's the point of the law. But the law is not there as with the intent of giving the master some kind of a back door to just wailing, uncontrollably on their slave. So that's one. Another one that comes to mind is Numbers chapter 5. If you guys are familiar with the Sotah, the test for the unfaithful wife. Yeah. There's no question.
Well, tell us what that is in case someone doesn't know what that is. Yeah.
So in Numbers chapter 5, there's a test for the unfaithful wife. So this guy gets jealous, and the scene that's being said is that you have a woman who sleeps with a guy, and there's a seminal emission, right? That's what happens in the text. And yet the guy doesn't have proof. He doesn't have evidence. There are no witnesses to this. So what's a husband to do, right? It's so misogynistic. Anyway,
with his property, what's he do? What's the husband supposed to do with his property?
Yeah.
Right. How do we ensure that the bloodline stays pure? So,
God,
so what he disgusting. Does, there was something that happened in the ancient Near East that was called the River Ordeal, and it's sort of like that. The River Ordeal is the river was considered to be a deity, right? And so what they would do is, if the same sort of situation happened where you have somebody that is thought to have committed a crime or done something wrong, but there's no evidence, they can't adjudicate it because there's just no witness. What they'll do is they'll take the person that's suspected of it and they'll throw them in the river, and in different variations. And the river, being a god who knows what's going on, will do what it wants to do with that person. So if they're guilty, it might drown them or whatever. But if they're innocent, then they get out. And so then the judgment is made. It's a similar sort of situation in Numbers 5. So the unfaithful wife is brought to the tabernacle before the priest. And there's a concoction, a liquid concoction that's, made from like dust from the tabernacle floor. And, this text is read aloud saying, pronouncing judgment, a curse upon this woman if she's actually done that, and she accepts the curse and then drinks the potion. And if she's, then she goes home. And if she's innocent, she hasn't had sex with this guy, then she's able to bear children. Everything's great. If she is guilty, then the text is a little weird in the Hebrew. It's kind of unclear exactly what's going on, but basically it looks like her reproductive organs are fucked with.
Right.
I'm allowed to say that.
Yeah.
And she's not able to bear children. Right. So the way that this text is set up, the law is not, it doesn't even have abortion in mind. I don't think that's what's in the mind of the text.
Mm-hmm.
So, to say that this is like an abortion passage, I think it's only correct in a certain way, right? And the way that it is correct is if you in fact interpret this text like many or most fundamentalist evangelicals do, then they will say this is a law that was given to Moses. It was a practice that was done. And so in that scenario, even though the law isn't about abortion or being pro-abortion, there's no question that if this was actually carried out and there were women that had, sexual interactions with seminal emissions involved, that there would be aborted fetuses, right? There would be pregnancies that would be aborted. And so in that case, then the law is definitely, even though it's not about abortion, its end result is, abortive practices. And so being nuanced about that, I think, is actually really important.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So your point, I guess, overall is that atheists can tend to take something to an extreme that doesn't even need to be done that way, that there's plenty of damning content in the text itself.
Yes.
Is that did you get that, Kenneth? Sorry, we accidentally dropped you. Are you back?
Yeah. No.
Okay.
That's exactly it. Because it drives me nuts because I feel like we can steel man the Christian, as a former Christian, I feel like we can steel man the Christian position safely and still, be able to make our points. So I was wondering if
I agree.
Stood out.
That's a good point, Josh. I like that. Yeah, we have to be careful about that because it ends up hurting our position when we go over the top and try to make something there that's not there when there's plenty there.
And I just real quick, and Kenneth, I know because you said you read the book, and I really appreciate that. But you remember, Kenneth, like one of the chapters is about the formation of the Pentateuch. So did Moses write this thing? Yeah. And one of the things that I hear, not as often, but sometimes, is that, look, we know how the Bible came together. There were these 4 sources, and they were woven together, and we know that that's how it happened, right? And all the scholars agree with that. Well, sort of, right?
Do they?
So there are 2 main schools of thought on how the Pentateuch came together. One of the main ones is what's called the documentary hypothesis, and that's what they're talking about. And there are brilliant people that hold to that. Joel Baden is one of them up at Yale, and he's written the book on it. And but there are also European scholars that hold to a different type of formation. The point is that you don't want to go saying everybody agrees that the JEDP is what I always hear it called, which is fine, but the documentary hypothesis, that's proven and everybody agrees with it. Well, you're setting yourself up, you're making yourself vulnerable because they don't all agree on that. And you don't even have to go there. What you can say and be suffice is everyone agrees. Evangelicals, liberals, whatever, anybody that's a serious biblical scholar, the consensus is that Moses didn't write the Pentateuch, period. And we've known that for more than a century, right? So
But
that's
there
all
are
you really
there are
need.
still your garden variety Christians sitting in the church pews every Sunday who are convinced that he did because
Sure.
unschooled pastors continue to tell them that he did. Isn't that what we've experienced?
I mean, I was one of them.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
And that's an interesting point in itself, just to get people out of the mindset that there is one reading of the Bible, one perfect reading of the Bible.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, anywho, well, I appreciate the answer.
Thanks for the call,
Yeah.
Kenneth.
Kenneth,
Thank
good
you,
to hear
Kenneth.
from you.
Yeah, man.
Yeah. See you
Yeah.
tomorrow night, dude.
Have fun, guys.
I want to say
Yeah.
thank you to Asexual Atheist. Had a question, and what does Volume 1 mean, Dr. Josh?
So on the atheist, sorry, I'll do it. Volume 2's coming.
You know, before we
That
move
was
on,
a setup.
I have to admit how embarrassed I am right now because
Uh-oh.
I come home and I love listening to podcasts or different things while I'm working, and so I knew.
Well, I think Genevieve will be back shortly. Let's take another call. Josh, you ready?
Yeah, all set.
I see you guys, the Elliot, Bonnie, and Kiro. We're going to get to you, but Elliot, you've been waiting a few minutes. Elliot, him from Tennessee, great state, wants to ask about the origins of the Sea People and discuss with Dr. Josh. So we'll bring you on. Elliot, hello, are you there?
Hey, how's it going?
Good.
Hey,
Good to
Elliot.
hear from you.
Yeah, I'm so excited to talk to you both. Big fans of you both, and Genevieve as well. I know
Thank you.
I know this question isn't exactly Dr. Josh's wheelhouse, but I was so fascinated with the discussion about the Sea Peoples and kind of where this group of invaders come from. It almost kind of seems like to me this is essentially like an ancient Near East band of pirates, practically. I mean, is that kind of a decent understanding, or where are the origins of these people that we know of?
Yeah. So the guy that is like the man, the myth, the legend that writes on this is Eric Klein. And he wrote a book called 1177. I think it's the fall of civilization, the year civilization fell.
Mm-hmm.
And so he goes into great depth about, right in the early 12th century and what happened. But for everybody, that might not know, the Sea Peoples, there's a time right around 1200 BCE, Egyptian power is starting to wane over Canaan, over Palestine, and they've been in control of it for much of the late Bronze Age, most of the second half of the second millennium. And there's this, archaeologically, we can see that there are just these massive destruction layers in a bunch of different cities along the Mediterranean coast. And we also have these Egyptian inscriptions at a place called Medinet Habu. And by the way, he's absolutely right. This is not like my area of expertise. Egyptologists are
As he reels off these names and places off the cuff. Yeah, I don't really know a lot about this, but blah 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 blah.
So, touche. There are depictions, like actual iconographic depictions of these people in boats that are coming, into Egypt, and there's this huge battle right on the borders of Egypt by sea, by land, and it's this group that's known as the Sea Peoples, right? And now, the Egyptians are able to fight them off, it seems, and yet we have all these destructions down the coast. What scholars have postulated here is that you have this movement of some type of a group of people that's coming down from the Aegean region. And there's a lot of, it's very complex how they determine that sort of thing. we don't think that this is the first time that the people from the Aegean obviously have come down into Egypt. We think there are mercenaries that, have been down in the region already. But at any rate, it does seem like there's this group of people that comes down, bringing destruction with them. And ultimately, what's perhaps to me most interesting about them is there's one group in the Sea Peoples. We have like the Denyen and the Cheker and the Weshesh, and I can't remember all the others, but there's another one called the Peleset. It's a group of one of the groups in the Sea Peoples. Well, the Peleset are the Philistines.
Oh.
And the Philistines get, rebuffed. They get stopped at the Egyptian border. And what we are reasonably sure about is that they go back up north and settle along the coasts in Canaan. So you get this Pentapolis, right? You get Gaza, you get Ashkelon, you get Gath, you get these major Philistine cities right there at the beginning of the Iron Age. And lo and behold, early Israel, you look in like the books of Samuel, who are they fighting against? They're fighting against the Philistines.
Yeah.
Right. And so, it's very complicated. I just wrote the chapter in volume 2. I wrote last month. I finished the chapter on the Exodus, the historicity of the Exodus, or the non-historical validity.
Yeah.
And then I just wrote the chapter on archaeology, which is on the conquest account in Joshua, and how, sorry, everybody, spoilers, but the conquest account's bullshit, right? And we know that archaeologically. But then it addresses, well, how did Israel come about? And last thing I'll say, what scholars are unified on, consensus scholarship, archaeologists, biblicists, is that the Israelites didn't come from outside of Canaan. The Israelites were Canaanites. They were indigenous Canaanites. And they formed, probably, by interacting with, fighting against, and differentiating themselves from groups like the Philistines.
Mm-hmm.
Amazing. Did that answer your question pretty well, Elliot?
Yeah, definitely. I think it's really, really interesting, the connection between the Sea Peoples and the Philistines. And I wonder if it's maybe they're because we see the Philistines being the opposite end of this battle with the Israelites a good bit coming through, I think, the narrative. Is this maybe like a recent memory of maybe this invading group of people coming in, and the Israelite writers are just like still kind of salty about it? I mean, does that make sense?
Yeah, I mean, I think the Philistines clearly stay. They stay in Canaan. And so like Avraham Faust in 2006 wrote a book called The Ethnogenesis of Israel, or Israel's Ethnogenesis. And he's this is one of the things that he's arguing is, how did Israel form as a state, or form as a people group? And again, the consensus position at this point is that these indigenous Canaanites, when these Sea Peoples get stopped at the border of Egypt, they come back, and many of them settle in Canaan. And when they do that, they start pushing inland, right, and fighting against the people in the highlands. And of course, the people that are in the highlands are the Israelites, or become the Israelites. And so this sort of interaction, I definitely think that what the writer of Samuel is doing, this is a memory, or he has access to some oral traditions or whatever. I think that sort of stuff is still obviously very debatable. But I think this is, certainly recalling these formative days of the early Israelites sort of fighting against or interacting with this group of the Sea Peoples called the Peleset.
God, you're just a wealth of information. I could just.
I'm really not.
Yes,
There are
you
much better
really
scholars.
are.
You're too
But-
damn humble. My
Yes, you
word.
are. No, I'm looking at the clock. We've got half an hour left. I've got 1,000 questions myself. We've got 2 callers. I'm just.
Likewise.
How in the hell? Hey, Elliot, thank you. I'm gonna let you go if you got any more.
Thank you, Elliot.
Yeah, thank you for your call. That's a great question, man.
Yeah, thank you guys. Love the show. Love all three of you. Have a good
Appreciate
one.
it, man. Bye-bye.
Thanks, man. Yeah, I don't know what happened with my connection earlier. I'm back. I think what I was just saying briefly beforehand was that I'm so embarrassed because while I was working today, I was listening to, a bunch of your talks and sort of, just kind of getting ready for this show. And somehow, in hours of listening to your very smooth, enjoyable voice, I missed the fact that you're the fucking author of the Atheist Handbook to the Old Testament.
Oh my God, are you serious?
I'm serious. I'm dead serious. And so now I'm sort of shocked, like giddy. I get like a little starstruck because that is a book that I'm so also equally, even more so embarrassed to say, has just been in my shopping cart for the past year and a half. I have been so excited to read your book for so long, and thank you for writing it.
Well, I appreciate that.
I'm so sorry that I'm so bad at research, Dave. I should be better prepared for these guests, so I don't.
That's fine. That's fine. When do you anticipate volume 2 coming out, Josh?
So we're going to that Baja conference in July.
Oh, that's right. You mentioned that.
I definitely want to have it printed and in hand by then. But I'd like to have it. I probably shouldn't say this stuff because then I'll have to hold myself to it. But I'd like to have it done by the Tang Better Conference in May. So I'm working. I wrote the introduction yesterday. Yesterday.
Yeah.
And I'm working on the Egyptian history chapter now. So
for any of you in those areas, what Josh is talking about, there's a conference coming up in May that we're both speaking at in Fort Wayne, Indiana. Oz is putting that on and his gang at the Better Conference. And then there's one in July, the Atheist in Sarnia, Canada, right across the border from the Detroit area. We're going to be there in July speaking. So if you're in those areas, come out and see us. We got a couple more calls. I want to get to them. I've got 1,000 questions myself, but I always want to give deference to the callers if we can. Bonnie's been on a while. Her in Wisconsin, reading one of Dr. Bowen's books, has some questions about terminology in different versions of the Bible. Question is specific to the Hebrew language. Hello, Bonnie.
Hi.
Hey, thank you for holding a bit. Welcome to the show.
Oh, yeah, I love your show.
Thank you.
Okay, I have the Atheist Handbook to the Old Testament.
Awesome.
And I loved it. Okay, my question is, now I understand that you read Hebrew. I have the Jewish Study Bible. I have the Archaeological Study Bible. I have a lot of them. I also have a Bible that has an appendix in the back, where in the Hebrew Bible, over 300 times it would have said Ha Elohim, making Elohim plural, gods. Okay, but most Bibles are going to say God or Lord. And I'm wondering if it's like some kind of a conspiracy, instead of rendering Ha Elohim as the gods, why do they always just render it like the true God or Lord? There's over 300 times in the Hebrew Bible where it would have been Ha Elohim.
Yeah, so that's a good question. So just so everybody follows what Bonnie's talking about, if you put the ending "im" on the end of a word, it makes it plural. So melech means king and melachim means kings. So El or Eloah are two words for God in the singular, but then you've got this form Elohim or Ha Elohim, the gods. And so then the question is, well, why don't we translate this as the plural? And that's a fair question. It's going to vary depending on each passage. So quite often, it's very clear that even though it's a plural form, that it's being intended as a singular deity. A good example of this is actually in the first verse of Genesis 1, Bereshit bara Elohim. So bara is a third masculine singular verbal form, and Elohim is its subject. So in the beginning, or when God began to create the heavens and the earth. So like it looks weird to us. It's not quite the same as this, but in these examples, it's like saying, I put my pants on, or I'm putting my glasses on. Even though it's a pluralized form, it has a singular idea. Now that's not a great analogy because there are times that it definitely does mean gods, plural. So, it really just depends on the context. So I don't think there's a conspiracy. And maybe
can I say something?
Yeah, sorry. Go ahead. Sorry.
Okay, now I know what you're talking about. Like in the beginning, I understand that. But there's over 300 instances where it would have been Ha in front of Elohim, which would have made God. And yet almost every Bible, it's over 300 times, and yet every Bible says either God or Lord. Now, I'm thinking of like Genesis 5:22 and 24, where it's talking about Enoch. He would have, it says, after his father Methuselah, Enoch went on walking with it would have been the gods, not God or the Lord. It would have been the gods. It was Ha Elohim. So I understand what you're saying, but there's over 300 times in the Hebrew scriptures what it would, like the ark of the gods, the ark, the mountain of the gods, in front of Elohim. That's what I'm talking about.
I was just gonna pull up.
Well, Bonnie, is there something that you're thinking is behind that, or a point? Is there a
because most Christians, I don't know about the Jewish religion, but I know most Christians want to believe that God was just the God, just Jehovah or Yahweh, and they can't accept the fact that they were polytheistic, that they believed in many gods.
So
that's why I think.
Sorry. Go ahead.
No, I'm done.
Okay.
I just wanted to say, like this. So this example in Genesis 5:22, one of the reasons that I think it's justified to say the singular is because if you go 2 verses down, the text says, and Enoch walked around Yitzhalek with Elohim, and he was not, because Elohim lakach him, and lakach is the word to take, and it's also in the third masculine singular. So Elohim, even though it's in the plural in both of those places, they're representing it with a singular verb, and this is again very standard. Bonnie, if you want, email me at digitalhammurabi@gmail.com. And if there are certain verses where you're like, that doesn't make sense in this verse or in this verse and this one, go ahead and send them to me, and I'll try to make some time.
Because I have to say, if you're looking at a Jewish Bible and it says Elohim instead of Ha Elohim, they're deliberately misrepresenting that, because the Hebrew was Ha Elohim, Ha Elohim, not just Elohim, which is like all of these other Bibles are just going to say God or Lord for Elohim. So, okay, I'll email you.
Yeah, I think that'll be good. And I'll see. It'll probably be when I'm holding some screaming babies in one arm, but I'll try to click around and do a little looking into it for you.
That's very kind.
I appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Thank you for your call, Bonnie. Thank you for your call, Bonnie.
Thank you. Bye.
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 Yeah.
Bye.
Gosh, Dave, I know we want to get to these callers, but
No,
I
that's
swear
fine.
I get 1,000 more questions every single time
you
open your mouth, Josh. It's a
too.
problem. It's a problem.
Yeah, go ahead.
No, I was just wondering because obviously I don't have a PhD in Assyriology, and the familiarity that I do have with like the history of Israel is just from like my doing my own research, like reading other people's theses. And so what I understand is that Israel and Israelites were polytheistic or henotheistic for much
From
longer
the Collins
than
studio.
what is depicted in the Bible, if that makes sense. Like from what I understand is that, you know, there were people who had tried to sort of unite Israel under one God, and they kind of failed and failed until it was successful. And so a lot of the stories that you see in like the Christian Old Testament will sort of like, you know, whitewash that history to point to there is one God and there has always been one God, when in actuality, when you're looking at, you know, archaeology and you know, even just like historical comparative linguistics amongst Israelites and Canaanites, that was not the case. And I guess I'm just wondering how much of Israel's sort of polytheistic or even like henotheistic nature was sort of brushed from the Bible, and does that translate to not just like the Christian Old Testament, but also like the Pentateuch?
Yeah, I mean, a good place I think that you can see this sort of thing is actually in the Pentateuch in Deuteronomy 32. So there are kind of two main passages that people talk about, and I'll be quick with this. Psalm 82 and Deuteronomy 32. We're talking about the divine counsel, right? So like, let us make man in our own image. That sort of language that you see in Genesis 1. It's Deuteronomy 32 talks about how Yahweh has given his portion from among the nations, right, by Ale. And so then the question is, well, you know, are we talking about two different gods here? Is Ale one God, like that's the head god, like you see in Canaanite culture, like at Ogarid or something, and Yahweh is like one of the minor deities, maybe the storm deity, or are Ale and Yahweh, you know, meant to be taken as one, you know, like syncretized? And I think that the way the Deuteronomy shakes out is it is trying to say, no, you know, like Ale and Yahweh, same deity. You know, it's not two different deities here. But I think it's it's a good indicator. It's like not an echo, but it shows that they're having to do something here, right? In the same way, very like in the David story. One of the reasons that we think that David is a historical figure, and that what we see in in the historical writings of the Tanakh represents accurate history, just spun history, is because of what you see being said about somebody like David. So David is a thug, right? If you read the stories, he's a thug, but yet the way that it presents it, all the people that he's a thug, you know, to they're all actually the bad guys, and he's
the enemies of God. Enemies of God. Right. He's
and you wouldn't do that if you wouldn't spin something that didn't need to be spun.
Yeah. And that's how I've always kind of seen David, is that like, yes, he was a real person, but there was sort of this propaganda campaign that
man
came
after God's own heart,
sort
though.
of like, yeah, exactly. And by uplifting David as this, you know, epic character, they've, you know, sort of added more legitimacy to Yahweh and the whole claim to Israel.
Well, I want to get to Kiro. We're going to get you a call in a minute, but I don't want us to leave the show. We've only got a few minutes left, but I feel like this point needs to be made tonight, because we're talking Old Testament, and that's your area of expertise. But like we talked about on the phone the other day, Josh, the Christian world I grew up in, the evangelical, fundamentalist, Bible-believing, charismatic world, the underlying sentiment about the Old Testament was, well, that's kind of unfortunate, you know, that angry God over there. Let's don't talk a whole lot about that.
Well,
let's
that
focus.
was the Old Testament.
Yeah, that's the angry Old Testament God, and let's talk about Jesus and the good stuff. And I can't let them get a pass on that, because the Old Testament is referenced so much in the New Testament by Jesus himself, as in the days of Noah, so shall it be in the coming of the Son of Man. You can't just ignore those Old Testament mythological stories as we know them to be now. If the character of Jesus believed in a literal Noah and a literal flood and a literal Moses and a literal Lot, righteous Lot, the writer of Hebrews calls him, we can't just let them pass on that. That's what. Speak to that in 2 minutes, Josh. What are your thoughts about that as a former evangelical yourself?
Yeah, I mean, this was one of the things that drove me out, right? Is those are the types of things. If it's like if Jesus says it, that's one of those pins that you can, nails you can drive into the wall, and
Right.
that's a firm fixed point. You can build off that. So
No
if he's
pun
talking
intended.
about,
Yeah. I'm
Geez,
so sorry.
No, sorry. That's and so that's why I think that when you see these historical problems in the Hebrew Bible, there's this quick move to kind of get away from. And it's not just historical problems, right? There's a guy named Randall Rouser who's a super nice guy, very intelligent guy, and he wrote a book called, I think, Does Jesus Love the Canaanites? And what he's arguing is that, look, stop trying to whitewash this away. This is genocide that's being talked about here.
Right.
But we have to think of a new way to interpret this, right? Now, I will say this. If there are going to be Christians, I want them to be those kinds of Christians.
Yeah, absolutely.
I want them to be like Megan, my wife is a Christian, right? She's an Anglican. And she'll be the first one to come down here and say, of course, the Old Testament's horrible. Like, what?
Yeah.
I like Jesus, right?
But it's the same God. But it's the same God.
Right.
That's my point.
But the way that she interprets the text is in no way this sort of,
it's not literal. It didn't really happen. Right.
Yeah.
Right.
And so God is using a flawed, story or group of stories. And those are the Christians that I want around, because the reality here is that those people don't infringe on the rights of the LGBTQ community.
No, they're not hurting anyone.
That's right. And so, yeah, I think that if Christianity is going to move forward in a healthy way, I think that's the way that it's got to go.
Well, and that's why I always, in my talks and in whatever I do, I try to make a very clear distinction between Christianity. Not all Christians are the same, and I speak out against fundamentalism, evangelicalism, those brands, those iterations of Christianity that are really doing damage.
That's what my books are directed at.
I know they are.
All of the arguments in my Atheist Handbook to the Old Testament, they're against fundamentalist viewpoints. That's what they're almost exclusively, fundamentalist and Christian apologists.
Well, let's take, we're going to talk about Satan now, because he's a real problem and he's really been after me a lot lately. No, we've got Kiro in Tennessee. Kiro Wolf, he's did the super chat earlier, wanted to discuss history of Satan in the Old Testament with Dr. Josh. Really quick, we've got a few minutes. Kiro, how you doing?
Man, peace and blessings, brother.
Yeah.
I'm about 10 years out. I'm about 10 years out from being free from the bondage of Christ. I started reading. How I got free was a good friend of mine challenged me to read the Bible in its entirety, and I got about halfway through with it, and I realized that it all started to kind of fall apart, and I realized, this is a really heinous book, and it's full of a lot of terrible atrocities. But one of the things I was looking for when I was reading the Bible in its entirety was the story of Satan. Because in the church, we're told he was a musician, he was the archangel of music, and this whole cinematic story about him getting jealous of God and getting cast out of heaven. And so when I was reading the Bible, I couldn't find it in there. And the closest thing I could find was the story in Isaiah, where he refers to Lucifer being cast out. And from my own studies, that seems to be referring to the king of Babylon. Yeah. And not the typical Satan. And the word Satan that's used in the Bible is more of it means the adversary, and not an actual name like a person's name. So I have a lot of things I would love to discuss with you, Josh. I don't ever get a chance to have like a direct discourse with somebody who studies this for real. I just read the books. So I would like to hear your input on that and what you have to say about it.
Yeah, I mean, so Elaine Pagels has written on this pretty extensively, and if anybody goes over to Myth Vision's channel, Derek interviewed her in person, and she talked about this, the development of Satan extensively. So like somebody like her obviously has much greater expertise than I do in it. There's no question that the figure of Satan developed. And one of the things, so like when you go to the book of Job, for example, and it says, and Ha-Satan comes up, this isn't like the guy with horns, right? And a forked tail or something. This is the adversary, as you say, and he's part of the divine council. But there's something that happened in the Second Temple period, and that is, as the end of the first millennium was, the first millennium is drawing to a close, BCE. There's this thing started to happen where believers started looking around, the faithful were looking around and saying, well, we're supposed to be like winning at some point. What's going on here? Why is it that God's plans keep getting thwarted, right? And one of the things that developed is this idea of apocalypticism. And apocalyptic literature, without going into a lot of detail, sort of hangs on two basic things. One of the main things is this dualistic approach to reality. So God isn't God, like, if God is all powerful and sovereign and in control, why are we still getting, why are we still in this hellish existence? Well, there's got to be this other force out there, this evil force that's working against God's plan. So this duality starts to develop. And so then this apocalyptic literature, so now God is not, he's not the author of evil, right? He can't be the one that's doing it. He's got to be allowing it somehow, but for his own ends. And so ultimately, he's not the one bringing it. And, so when you read through things like the book of Daniel, which is apocalyptic literature, and you have, angel stands before Daniel and says, the prince of Persia was withstanding me. And when he goes, the prince of Greece will come. Well, these are divine beings that are fighting against them. Right. And this is the idea of apocalyptic literature. So when you then see the other aspect of apocalyptic literature, it's pulling back the curtain to show the recipient of this vision or this dream, this unseen realm, right? The heavenly realm, the supernatural realm. And the curtain gets pulled back and you go, oh my God, look at all the demons and the forces that are fighting against God in the background, but hang on, because God, it's right around the corner. God's gonna come and put it all right. And so that answers things like the book of Daniel. Why does Daniel fail on its face? Why does it get reworked, brought into the New Testament? Why does Jesus say, like, hey, you're not going to, as Genevieve was talking about, it's not going to pass away? Why is it that Paul says, we who are alive and remain will be caught up together with them in the clouds? Why is it that Peter, pseudo Peter, whatever, has to say, don't count God's slackness, as he's giving more and more opportunities? It's because it allows for this dualistic, he's allowing Satan to do his thing, but don't worry, God is still in control in the end.
He went out for cigarettes, but he'll be back any moment.
So man created Satan, so there's a bad guy. You've got to have a villain in any story. There has to be a villain and a hero. And that's right. And so the writers,
it was an evolving duality.
Right. Yep. Does that make sense, Kiro?
Okay. Well, yeah, that makes perfect sense. I have one small question on tack on the end of that as far as the term Lucifer, meaning morning star. And correct me if I'm wrong, but wasn't Jesus referred to as the morning star in Revelation? And that's interesting to me. So I don't know if you have any commentary on that, but
I don't. I haven't thought about that.
I think he's called the son of the morning.
Yeah, well, it's because Lucifer was Latin for like light bringer, and then in Revelations, I believe in one of the translations of the New Testament, it mentioned that Jesus, in this string of names that they gave him, because it's the more names you have, the more important you are. They mentioned that he was also a light bringer, but as far as I understand, that is where Lucifer comes from, which is that Latin translation, which is just for light bringer. Yeah, I don't,
Okay.
I'm curious, Dr. Josh, is Lucifer actually considered a genuine character in the Old Testament?
So I haven't looked through Isaiah 14 in a while.
Well,
So go ahead.
to my understanding, Lucifer is like what they refer to the planet Venus because it's the brightest star in the morning, or it looks like a star. That's the things that I've read and studied. That's
Yeah,
what I've gathered. Now I don't know the validity of
I'm
that.
not
but
familiar, but that
what
makes
I was
perfect
told.
sense.
Mhm.
It's as far as I understand, over the last 2,000 years, we've sort of taken this idea of Lucifer and Satan and the snake and sort of kind of jumbled them together as this one thing
Yeah,
that you really don't actually see happen in the Old Testament
he's the
whatsoever.
character, an
It's-
amalgamation of several characters.
Exactly.
Basically, he's the bad guy. And I think there's going to be a surprise twist at the ending where Jesus and Satan are the same. And yeah, and it's
Is
gonna,
it gonna be like a Scooby-Doo?
yeah, something like that.
You're gonna like pull the mask off of Yahweh.
I would have gotten away with it too. If it weren't for
Or
those
you're gonna, like,
Scientologists.
exactly.
Well, look, I
Thanks,
appreciate
Kiro.
everything that y'all are doing. I would love to contribute any way I can to everything y'all are doing. Keep
You're so
it
sweet.
up, and y'all have a good evening.
Thanks
Thank
for
you
calling,
so
buddy.
much.
Thanks for
Thank
your
you, man.
support.
Take
Bye
care.
bye. Oh man, we're out of time. I hate it.
God.
We had another call. I don't know. Yeah, she's not there. We can't take her now. But Kathy wanted to talk about the evangelical Christian persecution she's been feeling personally lately. That's for a talk for another time. Kathy, if you're still here,
Please call back next week. Oh my
call
God.
next week or call tomorrow night. I'm on The Perspective with Kenneth Leonard. That's Ethan Michael's show, 8:00 Eastern tomorrow night. We're happy to talk to you there. But call next week, please. We'd love to chat with you about that. Gosh, Josh, we got to go, man. But we're both, Genevieve and I are both just like, we could do this forever.
Yeah.
What a great show. What a great conversation.
We have to have you back sometime because I feel like in an hour and a half, I can't go through all the questions that I have.
Yeah.
That sounds great.
Even remotely.
And we're
Appreciate you
looking
guys having me.
forward to hanging when we get to hang in person. Folks, like the channel, subscribe, please. If you haven't, consider supporting us on Patreon if you can do that. Thank you for the super chats and everything you do. We're trying to have as you can see, we're trying to have important conversations and things that help people, make people help people understand and work through things in life better. And these are important issues. Like we mentioned at the end, the Old Testament definitely affects the New Testament, which definitely affects how people think and how they feel and what their life looks like, and Jesus Christ, how they vote. So these things matter. These conversations matter, and I appreciate what you're doing, Josh. I wanted to get to more of your motivations for why you're writing the books and stuff like that, and
We'll have to do it next time.
Yeah, we're gonna have to do it again. You need to have a channel, man. You need to be doing this every week. I'd love to.
We do have a channel.
Yeah, Digital Hammurabi.
I'm sorry. I'm gonna get over there.
God.
I'm embarrassed for you, Dave.
Yeah, you
Josh,
should be.
I'm embarrassed for myself that I watched so many Digital Hammurabi videos today, and I somehow didn't put 2 and 2 together that you are the Josh Bowen that wrote.
I'm getting over there. I want to be on there with you. I want to do whatever.
Yes.
So I'm glad you do that. No, seriously, I didn't know that. But tell us what that channel is again for the viewers.
Yeah, so Digital Hammurabi, HaMMurabi. My wife runs it. She's also an Assyriologist with a minor in Hebrew Bible, and she's far more brilliant than I am, and better looking too. So it's nice, and she's got a British accent. So
oh my God, she's the whole package.
She really is. But
are you rating your wife's Tinder bio right now? I feel like she's taken. But let me know. Just kidding.
All right. But we put out videos essentially making the ancient Near East and the Hebrew Bible accessible and understandable.
Oh my God. I want to.
So we do a lot of interviews with, high-level scholars. We had John Collins on from Yale, Joel Baden on, had Bruce Wells on from University of Texas, Austin, and talking about ancient Near Eastern stuff, Bible stuff. We do a lot of edited videos that talk about things like the dating of the book of Daniel or slavery in the Hebrew Bible or
Wow.
all those kinds
I
of
did.
things. So
I'm sorry. I wasn't aware of it. I'm glad I am now.
I was just teasing.
No, I love that. I'm glad you're doing that. I think it's great. How else can people support you and find you? I know the books, but what else, Josh?
Yeah, we're I sent in one of those. I already forgot what it's called. Tree link, I think. I think it's
Linktree.
Linktree.
Yes.
No boomer jokes, everybody.
You're so fun.
That's okay.
But,
Dude, I'm older than you, and even I knew that.
We have that's funny. So, no, I'm just kidding. We have a website, digitalhammurabi.com, and all our stuff is on there. But if you go to Amazon and type in Joshua Bowen, it'll bring up all 4 of our books now. 2 more are coming by the middle of next year. So
awesome.
But it's got all our information in there.
Well done. Well, give my best to Megan. Look forward to meeting you guys next year at the conferences we're going to share. Genevieve, good to see you again as always. Folks, thanks for following and watching and calling in. Keep supporting us. We appreciate everything about you. So love you guys. That's our show for this week.